Hello, this is James with a new story on my author channel. I hope you enjoy my story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
They say the enemy you know is better than the one you don't. But what if the deepest wound is dealt not by a stranger on a distant battlefield, but by the very blood you share? It's said that combat strips you down to your true self, but my own war didn't begin on any battlefield. It started at a family dining table. My name is Alara Vance. I am 31 years old and a lieutenant in the U.S. Army. Or rather, I was. But let's begin before the military attire and formal salutes, long before Lieutenant Vance was a reality. To comprehend my journey, you must first grasp the experience of growing up invisible, a person whose achievements went unnoticed, whose words faded before they could leave the house, and whose own family struggled to recall her name. I was born 2 years after my brother, Liam, and from the outset, he was more than just the firstborn. He was the first in every regard. The first to take a step, the first to utter a word, the first to bring home awards from the school's science competition, the first to enlist, and perpetually the first in our parents' estimation. I recall vividly a school science fair when I was 10. My project, a meticulously crafted solar panel model, won second place. Liam, meanwhile, had convinced the judges his volcano, built from papier-mâché and baking soda, was conceptually groundbreaking. He received an honorable mention. That evening, my parents celebrated his ingenuity, barely glancing at my silver ribbon. My father often described Liam as a born soldier, the genuine article. I was simply quiet Alara, the one who preferred books to ball games, analysis to anecdote. And that was never sufficient. Our family adhered to 2 core beliefs, the nation and Liam. Our household was less a home and more a military institution. My father, a veteran of the Navy, managed it with the precision of a naval base. Up at dawn, rigid schedules, no tolerance for sentimentality. We ate breakfast in silence, each consumed by their own thoughts, the clinking of cutlery the only sound. Chores were assigned like duties, completed with military efficiency. My mother, who had worked in a field hospital, possessed the delicate skill of a surgeon and the stoic silence of someone who has seen too much. She moved through the house like a ghost, efficient and often unreachable. They loved us, I suppose, but in the detached, conditioned manner a soldier loves their orders. You quickly understood that your right to exist was directly proportional to your accomplishments. Mediocrity was a quiet form of treason. Liam flourished in this environment. He treated expectations as a source of energy, becoming the captain of the football team, a top student, and enrolling in officer training by the age of 21. His every success was a carefully placed brick in the monument of his perceived destiny. Whenever he entered a room, my father's posture would straighten with pride, his gaze softening. When I entered, it was as if the air remained completely still, my presence acknowledged only by its absence of noise. I learned early that silence was my safest weapon, my shield against their unspoken disapproval. I didn't stage a rebellion. I enlisted. It wasn't a snap decision, but a slow burn of a yearning for something more. The moment crystallized during Liam's commissioning ceremony. I stood in the back, watching my parents swell with pride, Liam radiant in his new uniform. A single thought cut through the polite applause. I need a place where I'm not just a shadow. Many presumed I was merely tracing Liam's path, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I joined the military because I craved a place where my name carried significance, where my actions mattered more than the volume of my voice. Basic training was a crucible, stripping away everything I thought I knew about myself. My quiet nature, often mistaken for timidity, proved to be an asset. I listened, I observed, and I absorbed information. I discovered my niche in reconnaissance, I had a talent for interpreting landscapes, for seeing danger, and making critical decisions with quiet authority. My leadership style wasn't based on charm or grandstanding, but on accuracy. A meticulous attention to detail and a calm under pressure, and it proved profoundly effective. I gained the respect of my peers. They knew that when Alara Vance spoke, it wasn't a suggestion, it was a well-considered directive. Promotions arrived more gradually than Liam's, whose career seemed to explode onto the scene with every new assignment, but they came. My commanding officers knew they could count on me. I didn't require the limelight to have an effect. My impact was felt in the precision of my reports, the safety of my teams, the successful execution of missions others deemed impossible. At home, however, it was a different reality. Whenever I phoned, my mother would invariably ask, "Have you spoken to Liam? He's been promoted yet again. He's doing so well." My father would comment on how my brother was now in command of real men, implying that my covert operations were somehow less substantial. Even during the infrequent holidays I spent at home, our house had transformed into a monument to his success, adorned with plaques, pictures, and framed honors. His framed commission hung over the fireplace, his medals displayed in a glass case. I scanned the walls for a single photograph of myself in uniform, a small token of my service, but found none. It felt like being a guest in my own past. I never voiced my feelings. I simply observed. I tallied the myriad ways I was overlooked and smiled through their obliviousness, a smile that tasted like ash, but I never ceased to notice. Every silence, every averted glance, every mention of Liam was a fresh tally mark. It was 2 years ago that we were both stationed in the same region, assigned to different units but operating within the same area of conflict. A strange twist of fate, or perhaps just the brutal efficiency of military logistics. I was leading a recon team in high-risk territory, specializing in infiltration and clandestine surveillance, while Liam had recently been promoted to a tactical oversight position, a step removed from the direct grit of the field. Rumor had it he was on an accelerated path to becoming a major, potentially bypassing several standard ranks. I vividly recall the briefing where our professional lives intersected once more. He entered the room with his trademark confident grin, his uniform crisp, exuding an effortless authority before he had even spoken. His eyes swept over the room, pausing briefly, almost dismissively on me. "Lieutenant Vance," he said, the title sounding like a private joke, a reminder of our disparate ranks, a subtle put-down. "Captain," I replied with a nod, maintaining my professionalism, refusing to be drawn into his game. Afterward, he pulled me into a brief, almost perfunctory embrace, clapping my back with a force that was just a little too much, a performative gesture for the benefit of anyone watching. "Still playing hide-and-seek in the undergrowth, are we?" he joked, his voice booming slightly louder than necessary. "Maybe one day you'll get to lead a proper mission, Alara. One with some real teeth." I forced a laugh, a dry, hollow sound, as there was little else I could do. That was Liam. Charismatic, unflappable, always putting on a show, always needing to be the brightest star in the room. Yet, I detected an undercurrent of agitation in him, a desperate edge beneath the polished facade. He yearned for more than just decorations. He wanted a legacy, even if it meant forcing a situation that wasn't fully prepared, pushing boundaries to achieve a decisive, visible victory. I didn't realize it at the time, but that assignment would mark the start of my downfall. We had just received orders for a new operation, surveillance of a suspected enemy outpost, with instructions for minimal contact and intelligence gathering only. My team was to be the eyes and ears, slipping in and out unnoticed. I was designated as the team leader, a role I was highly proficient in. Liam, in a peculiar turn of events, was assigned as the liaison for oversight and strategic coordination. It was an odd placement, as he had no familiarity with the region or its unique challenges, having spent his career largely in conventional combat roles. When I questioned it during a pre-mission briefing, my superiors simply stated, their faces impassive, he has the attention of high-level command. Just cooperate with him, Lieutenant. It's a directive. I should have recognized the warning signs then, the subtle hints of political maneuvering over operational integrity, but I didn't see them clearly. Instead, I concentrated on preparing my team, studying terrain maps, setting timelines, and establishing contingency plans for every possible scenario. I invested hours poring over satellite imagery, adjusting routes, anticipating enemy patrols, visualizing every foot of the treacherous landscape. Liam, meanwhile, spent his time on the phone with command, lobbying to advance the mission's start time, pushing for an aggressive, immediate deployment. Why delay until 200 hours? He argued during our planning session, his voice echoing with impatience in the small tactical room. If we move now, at 22:30, we can catch them off guard before they have a chance to disperse or reinforce. His eyes were alight with an almost reckless ambition. I shook my head, my hand hovering over a detailed topological map. The satellite won't be in position until 01:45. We'll be operating blind if we go in early, Captain. We won't have real-time intel on enemy movements. You want to execute a high-stakes mission in complete darkness with only partial intelligence, based on old data. He leaned back in his chair, a slight, self-assured smirk playing on his lips. Sometimes, Ilera, speed is its own intelligence. The element of surprise is invaluable. You're not the one on the ground, Liam. I reminded him, my voice low but firm, the use of his first name slipping out in my frustration. He offered a slight, almost patronizing smile. You're overly cautious, Ilera. Always have been. Sometimes you have to take a calculated risk. It wasn't intended as a compliment. And yet, despite my fervent protests, despite my detailed arguments outlining the increased risks, he managed to get his way. Command sanctioned the updated schedule, overriding my tactical assessment. We moved out ahead of time. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I'll pause my story here, because the events that followed, the pandemonium, the casualties, and the suffocating silence that ensued, demand their own telling. That is the second part of this account. For now, all I will say is this. That evening, something erupted in more than just the earth and foliage. It decimated my service record, my professional future, and any semblance of a relationship I had left with my family. Some explosions are deafening, others are silent, creeping in slowly and proving devastating in their gradual arrival. That night, I experienced both. We began our deployment at 2,230 hours. The moon was a faint sliver, almost entirely obscured by a haze, casting a light that distorted depth perception and turned familiar landmarks into sinister shadows. The dense vegetation, the treacherous ground, the eerie quiet of the night, all screamed at me to adhere to our original plan and wait for the satellite to pass, to wait for the intel. But Liam's words lingered in my mind like a venomous whisper. You're overly cautious, Ilera. Sometimes you have to take a calculated risk. So, I suppressed my gut feelings, the instinct that had kept my teams alive for years, and issued the command to proceed. I can still feel the sensation of crouching in the muck, my boots sinking into the soft, yielding mud with each step, the cold sweat tracing a path down my back despite the stifling humidity. We moved with haste, 3 teams spreading out like phantom tendrils, covering ground that felt alien without the familiar guidance of real-time intelligence. I was at the forefront, directing the others with silent hand gestures, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, each beat a silent prayer. Then it all went wrong. A brief flash, almost imperceptible at first, followed by a moving shadow that wasn't one of ours, a glint of metal where there should have been none. The explosion followed in a fraction of a second, a concussive roar that ripped through the night, shattering the silence and the illusion of safety. We had walked directly into an ambush, a meticulously laid network of tripwires and remotely detonated explosives, strategically placed in what we now realized were kill zones. Someone had anticipated our arrival and known our exact timing. Corporal Finch, who had been just ahead of me, was thrown 15 feet by the initial detonation, a ragdoll against the brutal force. I crawled to him through the debris, the acrid smell of burnt earth and singed flesh filling my nostrils. His gear was partially melted, his mouth agape but making no sound, his eyes wide and unseeing. He was gone before I could even attempt to stop the bleeding, before his last breath could even register. Our communication systems were instantly jammed, rendering our radios useless, isolating us further in the chaos. The extraction was a chaotic disaster. One of the helicopters came under heavy enemy fire during its approach and crashed before it could land, its rotors shredding themselves against the unforgiving terrain. 2 dead, including Corporal Finch, 5 injured, all on my watch, all because of a reckless decision forced upon me. When we were finally evacuated hours later, after a brutal, prolonged firefight, I collapsed near the landing area, my body trembling, my mind numb. I watched the sunrise paint the horizon with false hope, feeling as though it had personally betrayed me. I replayed the events over and over in the sterile confines of my temporary quarters. What had I overlooked? What had I permitted to happen? The official debriefing was cold and clinical, a stark contrast to the visceral horror I had just endured. 3 officers, their faces devoid of emotion, a silent observer taking notes, and a recording device humming softly. There was no empathy, just a recitation of ranks, times, and procedures. "Why did you approve an early deployment, Lieutenant Vance?" one of them asked, his voice flat. I was informed that the window of opportunity was closing, that immediate action was required to prevent the dispersal of the target. I stated, my voice steady, though my insides churned. "Who informed you?" I paused. The truth felt like a betrayal itself. Saying "my brother" didn't seem like the correct response, because he hadn't technically issued an order. He had merely made a suggestion, albeit one that carried the weight of presumed higher authority. "Captain Vance," I finally said, the name a lead weighed on my tongue. The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel suffocating, the air thick with unspoken judgment. "And what was his authority over your field command?" "None," I conceded, the word tearing at me. And with that, the trap was sprung. My professional reputation, built painstakingly over years, began to crumble around me. Liam was never present at the inquiry. He submitted a 2-paragraph written statement, vaguely mentioning joint operational pressures and in-the-moment discretion as factors leading to the mission's expedited timeline. There was no reference to our heated conversation, no admission of his influence on the revised plan, and certainly no acceptance of responsibility for the catastrophic outcome. It was a masterpiece of deflection, a cold, calculated move to shift blame. The following week, I received a disciplinary report, a failure to follow established operational protocols, leading to preventable losses. The recommendation was for immediate suspension from active duty and a formal review of my commission, effectively ending my career. I read the words 5 times, each rereading a fresh stab of betrayal. My rank remained, for the time being, a hollow title, but my reputation was in ruins. Whispers followed me down the corridors, sideways glances, a sudden awkwardness from peers who once respected me. To make matters worse, Command opted not to conduct a more thorough investigation into the planning phase, concluding that the responsibility lay solely with the commander on the ground. This meant Liam was completely unscathed, his career trajectory untouched by the disaster he had orchestrated. I took a few days of leave and went home. It was a mistake, a desperate, final attempt to find solace where there had only ever been expectation. I'm not sure what I was anticipating, perhaps a measure of compassion, or for someone to acknowledge that it wasn't entirely my fault, that there were other factors at play. Instead, I entered the living room to find my father in his armchair, meticulously polishing the frame of Liam's newest promotion photograph, Captain Vance, now fast-tracked to Major. He glanced at me once, without a smile, his eyes hard and accusing. "You made a poor decision, Alara," he stated flatly, his voice devoid of warmth. "People lost their lives because of it." The words felt like physical blows. "I wasn't the only one who made it," I said, my voice barely a whisper, a desperate plea for understanding. He simply shrugged, his gaze returning to the gleaming frame. "You were the one in command. The responsibility is yours alone." My mother lingered nearby, wringing her hands, her face a mask of silent sorrow, but she remained silent, offering no comfort, no defense. I looked at her, my eyes pleading. "Mom." She avoided my gaze, her silence a heavier judgment than my father's words. "It's a mark on your record, Alara," my father went on, his voice a low, final pronouncement. "The military does not easily forgive such errors." That evening, I sat on the edge of my old bed, the one with the faded floral comforter, staring at the wall, hoping anyone, would enter and offer a kind word, a gesture of comfort. No one did. The house was filled with a profound silence, heavier and more suffocating than any battlefield quiet. The next morning, I discovered a sealed envelope on the kitchen table with my name written on it in my mother's familiar, elegant script. I opened it to find an invitation to Liam's promotion ceremony. Major Liam Vance. Location, time, dress code. There was no personal note, no sign of warmth, just the cold, impersonal facts. I had the urge to set it on fire, to watch it burn into oblivion, just as my hopes had. But I resisted. I don't know why. Even then, a part of me yearned to be seen, to be included, not just acknowledged as an afterthought. A tiny, fragile ember of hope that maybe, just maybe, if I showed up, they would finally see me, truly see me. So I went. I arrived early, my uniform impeccably pressed, each metal polished to a mirror sheen, a silent defiance against the stain on my record. I even styled my hair in the neat, severe bun my father always said looked professional, hoping to elicit some sliver of approval. I stood at the venue's grand entrance, my heart racing with a mixture of dread and desperate hope, trying to shake the feeling of being a 12-year-old girl again, excluded from a game. The officer at the door checked his list. Name? Lieutenant Alara Vance. He scowled, ran his finger down the lengthy list, then checked it again, his brow furrowed. "I apologize, Lieutenant, but your name doesn't appear on the attendee roster. This is a restricted event." I was stunned, a cold dread washing over me. That can't be right. I have my invitation. I pulled it from my pocket, the crisp paper trembling slightly in my hand. "Ma'am, if you're not on the list, I am not authorized to let you enter." He gestured vaguely toward the crowd already gathered inside. I peered past him, through the polished glass doors, and saw them. My parents and some extended family members, laughing together at a beautifully adorned table, bathed in the warm glow of the chandeliers. I watched my mother adjust Liam's tie as my father beamed with pride, his arm around Liam's shoulders. They were celebrating his rise, utterly oblivious to my presence, to my humiliation, just feet away. I turned back to the officer, a profound emptiness settling in my chest. "It's all right," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper, the last ember of hope extinguishing. "Never mind." And I walked away, the click of my dress shoes echoing in the cavernous hallway, a silent retreat from a war I couldn't win. That was the last time I communicated with any of them. No phone calls, no messages. I blocked every number that was connected to my family, severing the cord with a decisive, painful swipe. I didn't weep. I didn't lash out. I simply vanished. From their lives. From the military installation, from the person I thought I was supposed to be. But the peculiar thing about vanishing is that it can grant you the room to reconstruct yourself, to redefine what it means to exist. Because the truth, much like a dedicated soldier, does not remain buried for long. There is a unique type of silence that follows a fall from grace. It doesn't roar. It whispers, a persistent, chilling hum. The world doesn't slam doors in your path. It simply ceases to hold them open for you. I was gone from the military installation within 3 days of my return from leave. It was officially termed extended leave pending review, a bureaucratic euphemism for being quietly sidelined, but we all understood the true meaning. I was out. I emptied my locker, the scent of metal and old uniforms clinging to my fingers. I turned to my weapon, its cold weight a stark reminder of what I was losing. And I carefully folded my name tag, Lieutenant Evance, into a small square, placing it in my duffel bag as either a memento or a caution. This is how quickly you can be erased. I relocated to a small town several states away, an anonymous speck on the map, renting a small, sparsely furnished apartment above a local supply shop. No rank, no uniform, just a woman haunted by her past, her identity stripped bare. I spent weeks lost in a meaningless cycle. Wake up, go for a run until my lungs ached, force down a meager meal, stare at the ceiling, waiting for the night to bring the merciful oblivion of sleep. Some nights, my dreams were filled with Corporal Finch crying for assistance, his eyes wide and lifeless. Other nights, it was my father's voice echoing, "You made a poor decision," over and over. But the most agonizing part was Liam's complete silence. Not one call, not one text, not one word of apology or concern. His absence spoke louder than any accusation. I could have let the bitterness consume me, and I came dangerously close. But a feeling colder than sorrow, sharper than anger, began to take root inside me. It wasn't a desire for vengeance. It was resolve. A quiet, burning need for justice, for truth. I began to investigate, not with fury, but with the same meticulous precision I applied to reconnaissance. Military records are a labyrinth, with most access points secured unless you know the precise questions to ask with the right level of clearance. But I had connections, discreet ones, individuals who still recalled the kind of soldier I was, the unwavering accuracy of my reports. I started by approaching a retired signals intelligence officer I had once worked with, a woman known for her uncompromising integrity. She owed me no favors, but she respected competence. It all started with a single classified document she discreetly sent my way. Satellite surveillance data from the night of the mission. The file was unequivocal. Our operational window had not been closing. In fact, Command had never sanctioned a change to our timeline. The authorization Liam had mentioned, the window of opportunity, was entirely fabricated. My blood ran cold, not in anger but in stark, clinical understanding. He had lied, deliberately, to gain personal advantage. I continued my search, following digital breadcrumbs. I uncovered internal communications, timestamp messages, official transcripts of calls. One was from Liam to a logistics officer, dated hours before our deployment, stating, "We can't afford to wait for her recon report. Believe me, I'll take responsibility if this goes wrong." The words seared into my mind. But he never did take responsibility. He let me take the fall, allowed my career to be shattered, my name dragged through the mud. I gathered all the evidence, every scrap of data, every damning email, and systematically built my case. I didn't contact the media. I had no interest in creating a public spectacle, no desire to wallow in sensationalism. My fight was not for public opinion, but for integrity. I sent the complete, meticulously organized file directly to the Office of Military Ethics, a division renowned for its impartiality and its rigorous investigations. There was no cover letter, just a data drive, a concise executive summary report outlining the timeline and discrepancies, and a single, powerful sentence typed at the top: "Truth matters, even when no one is watching." 3 months later, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was Colonel Sterling, one of my former commanding officers, a man known for his stern demeanor but absolute fairness. "Vance," he said, his voice unusually soft, "we owe you more than just an apology, Lieutenant. We owe you justice." I remained silent, no longer trusting in words, only in action. "We've re-examined your case. The review found substantial evidence of undue influence and misrepresentation of facts by Captain Vance. You've been exonerated. The official record has been corrected. Your disciplinary report has been expunged. You are welcome to return to active duty, effective immediately if you so choose." A tremor ran through me. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to believe I had moved beyond it all, that I no longer craved the military life that had brought me so much pain. But deep down, beneath the layers of hurt and resentment, I yearned for the rhythm of boots marching in unison, the crisp scent of purpose, the quiet camaraderie of a unit that truly valued its members. So I accepted. My return was not marked by celebration. There was no welcoming party, no warm reception, no fanfare. The whispers didn't vanish overnight, but they diminished, replaced by a grudging respect, then genuine admiration. But I came back with a renewed sense of fire. I took on new assignments, missions deemed impossible by others, and earned commendations, not by striving for recognition, but by delivering undeniable results. This time, however, I refused to stay in the background. I took the lead, stepping into the spotlight not for ego, but because I had earned my place there. I rewrote my own narrative, one mission at a time, with every strategic success, every life saved, every intelligence breakthrough. No shortcuts, no political maneuvering, just precision, resilience, and unwavering discipline. My efforts did not go unnoticed. My name, once hidden in the footnotes of reports, a mere whisper in the bureaucratic machinery, began to appear prominently in official briefings, now associated with respect, with unparalleled competence. I was addressed as "Ma'am," then "Commander," and eventually, "General Vance," each promotion a hard-won battle, a testament to my unwavering commitment to integrity and excellence. Years passed, not a great many, but enough for the scars to fade, for the whispers to turn to murmurs of awe, for my reputation to become unassailable. One morning, I received a secure message flagged as high priority, its digital seal gleaming on my screen. It was a formal invitation to an anniversary gala for the 17th Armored Division, the very division that had nearly ended my career. The invitation stated, "All high-ranking officers are requested to attend. Distinguished Service Awards will be presented. Formal ceremony." Below was a list of anticipated guests, carefully curated. My gaze locked onto two names listed lower down but unmistakably present: Colonel Marcus Vance and Major Liam Vance. My father and my brother. The irony was palpable, sharp and clear. I was no longer just invited. I was now being honored as the distinguished guest. That night, I sat in my office, the screen of my computer glowing in the dark, the invitation a stark contrast to the glowing words of my latest commendation. I thought of the young woman who had been turned away from a promotion ceremony she wasn't permitted to attend, her heart breaking in a deserted hallway. I thought of the person they had attempted to erase, to bury under layers of lies and silence. And a slow, deliberate smile formed on my face. Not because I sought retribution, nor because I had finally achieved victory over them. I smiled because I was about to walk into that room as someone they could no longer overlook, someone whose very presence was an undeniable truth. For years, I had envisioned this exact moment, not for the applause or the medal, though they were welcome, but for the profound silence that would follow, the kind of silence where no one interrupts because they have finally been forced to see you, truly see you, for the first time. I arrived just before dusk, a phantom from their past, now walking with undeniable gravitas. My uniform was immaculate, pressed to a perfect crease, with each ribbon precisely aligned, a testament to years of unwavering service. The general's stars on my collar shone with a significance that only those who have been invisible can truly appreciate. They were more than just metal. They were a testament to resilience forged in fire, a symbol of self-reclamation. The venue was more opulent than I had anticipated, a repurposed armory with its industrial steel framework still visible behind crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes, a powerful blend of military honor and elegant refinement. As I entered, the atmosphere seemed to shift, a ripple moving through the assembled guests. Heads turned, some with expressions of surprise, others with a hint of disdain from those who hadn't forgotten the scandal. A young lieutenant I had mentored years ago paused mid-sentence, nearly dropping his glass, his eyes wide with recognition and awe. An admiral I had once briefed on a perilous mission straightened his posture, offering a subtle nod of quiet respect. But I continued my steady, measured walk down a corridor I had once been barred from entering, my gaze fixed forward. At the far end of the hall, a large digital display scrolled through the names of the honored guests, illuminated for all to see. I saw my own name near the top, General Alara Vance, Guest of Honor. I felt a silent, almost disbelieving laugh rising in my chest, not of happiness, but of sheer, profound irony. After all those years of being omitted from lists, of being intentionally forgotten, here I was, at the very top of one no one could possibly ignore. The ceremony commenced with a series of long, predictable speeches, filled with military platitudes and polite applause. One by one, officers were recognized for their accomplishments, each called to the stage to receive their awards. The applause was polite, controlled, restrained. Then, the master of ceremonies stepped forward, his voice deepening for the final announcement. And now, he announced, his gaze sweeping the room, we come to a name that represents more than just a single achievement, more than a distinguished career. A low murmur spread through the audience, a ripple of anticipation. Tonight, we honor a leader who not only overcame a wrongful accusation, a career nearly derailed by injustice, but who rose from the ashes of adversity to lead with unparalleled distinction. She is a symbol of fortitude, resilience, and unwavering command, a testament to the enduring power of truth. Please join me in welcoming to the stage General Alara Vance. The room erupted. It was not polite applause. It was powerful, a thunderous wave that shook the very foundations of the hall. Some attendees rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Not everyone, but enough to create an echoing roar that filled the space. I walked toward the stage, passing through a gauntlet of clapping hands, intense stares, and 1,000 unspoken sentiments. As I ascended the steps, a 4-star general, his face etched with respect, smiled warmly. He pinned the medal just above my heart and murmured, "This is one for the history books, General." A true measure of leadership. They offered me the microphone. I hadn't intended to say anything, to simply receive the honor and leave. But to remain silent now would have been a form of surrender, a concession to the invisibility they had once tried to impose. I stepped up, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the crowd, my gaze sweeping past the sea of faces until I found them. My father, his posture rigid, his lips set in a thin, unmoving line, his eyes unreadable. My mother beside him, her hands clasped tightly as if in prayer, her face pale, and Liam, staring at me as if trying to determine whether this was all a terrible dream, a surreal hallucination of his own making. The golden boy's facade had finally cracked, revealing the man beneath, burdened by unspoken guilt. "I was not meant to be here," I began, my voice clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the vast hall. That is the reality. Years ago, I stood outside a hall much like this one, in this very uniform, and was informed that my name was not on the list. I was not deemed worthy of entry. A few whispers rippled through the room, and some eyes subtly, instinctively, darted toward Liam's table, a collective understanding dawning. On that day, I walked away. Not just from a building, but from people I held dear, people who were convinced I had failed, who chose to believe a convenient lie. But I never walked away from who I was, from what I knew to be true. I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. I rebuilt myself, quietly and arduously, brick by painful brick. And when the truth eventually came to light, I didn't demand retribution. I didn't seek public vindication. I simply asked for my rightful place. Silence. A profound, charged silence. This medal is not a symbol of redemption. It is a symbol of recognition. It does not erase the past. It honors what I became in spite of it, the strength I found when I was forced to stand alone. The applause started again, tentative at first, then building, but I held up a hand. I wasn't done. I stand before you today not because I was finally believed by others, but because I refuse to be erased. I refuse to let someone else dictate my worth. I stepped back from the microphone, and this time, I did not smile. My statement was complete. After the ceremony, dozens of people approached me. Young officers, seasoned veterans, and women in uniform with tears in their eyes, offering quiet words of thanks and admiration. One young cadet, barely out of basic training, whispered, "You're the reason I'm still serving, General. Your story gave me hope." I shook hands and offered nods of acknowledgement, a part of me soaking in the genuine appreciation, but another part waiting for the inevitable confrontation. My family was standing across the lobby, huddled together like a somber portrait from a bygone era, frozen and uncertain, watching me. I knew they would approach me, but I was not going to make it easy for them. I never thought they would come after me, not when I first left, and certainly not now, not after all these years. Yet, there they were, in the quiet corridor just outside the main hall, looking like individuals who had just witnessed a ghost adorned with stars. My father was the first to speak, his voice raspy, unfamiliar. "Alara." Just my name. No rank, no salute, the same tone he used when I had fallen short of his impossible standards. Except this time, the failure was not mine. I met his gaze, unwavering. He maintained his rigid posture, but there was a subtle sag in his shoulders, a slight tremor in his hand, as if something within him had finally given way, perhaps his pride, or the carefully constructed facade of control. "You never told us," he said, his eyes scanning my face, as if seeing me for the first time. "You never asked," I countered, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. He winced, a subtle but unmistakable reaction, the truth a bitter taste. "You could have reached out," my mother interjected, her voice soft, pleading, her hands still clasped together. "I did," I replied, a ghost of a bitter smile touching my lips. "I said all that needed to be said. You were just listening to a louder voice. A voice you preferred to hear." Liam stepped forward, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. He appeared older, not just in age, but in the burden he carried. The golden boy's brilliance had faded, replaced by the weary lines of a man who had chosen convenience over integrity. "I never intended for that to happen, Alara," he said, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "That night, the mission, it all got out of control. It was chaos." "Things didn't get out of control, Liam," I said, my voice calm but firm, a surgeon dissecting a lie. "You let them. You engineered a situation for your own gain, and then you abandoned me to face the consequences." He started to protest, a flicker of his old arrogance returning, but I raised my hand to stop him, a gesture that he, instinctively, obeyed. "I'm not here for a fight. I'm not here seeking closure either. I am here because I earned my position, not because I required your permission to attend." He was silent, his gaze falling to the polished floor. My mother's eyes welled with tears, overflowing onto her pale cheeks. "We were mistaken, Alara," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We didn't know how to trust you. We didn't know how to see you." I gave her a slight nod, a gesture of distant understanding, not forgiveness. "I didn't need your trust. I needed your support. I needed you to ask questions, to look beyond the surface, to believe in me." For a long, agonizing moment, no one spoke. The three people who had once been the unquestioned center of my universe stood before me, uncertain of their place, their power dissolved. And I, who had always been the quiet observer, the overlooked daughter, had become the one they could no longer dismiss, the one whose presence commanded silence. So I spoke. For all the years I had remained silent, for every unnoticed achievement, every unanswered question. "You taught me that family means loyalty," I said, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. "But you were the first to break that rule. You judged me as a failure before you even bothered to ask why. You stood by the one who had everything and abandoned the one who had to build herself from nothing." I moved closer to them, not with anger, but with absolute, unwavering clarity. "You made a choice to believe in silence, to accept a convenient narrative. I made a choice to speak through my actions, to fight for the truth. You chose comfort. I chose the truth." I looked directly at Liam, my gaze piercing. "I don't despise you, Liam, but I will never forget what you allowed to happen to me. I carried that burden by myself, that weight of unjust blame, and I learned to become stronger for it. I learned who I truly was without your shadow, without your expectations." Then, I uttered the words I had waited a lifetime to say, the ultimate declaration of my independence. "I no longer need a seat at the table, because now I build my own." They offered no response, not because they couldn't, but because they had no defense. Their silence, this time, was an admission of guilt, an acknowledgement of defeat. And that was all I needed. I turned and walked out of that hall, into the cool night air, where the stars stretched across the sky like medals only I could see, each one a silent testament to battles fought and won. Some people spend their lives seeking validation from their family. Others spend their lives trying to prove they were always worthy. As for me, I stopped chasing. I stopped explaining. I stopped making myself smaller to accommodate their comfort. Because it was never that I was too much for them. It was that they were never enough to contain what I was destined to become. And now I lead. Not because I need the world to remember my name, but because I finally remembered it myself. Alara Vance, General, daughter to no one, and a leader to thousands.